There are moments in life that split everything in two, before and after. The moment I stepped off that plane in Geneva, Switzerland, wrapped in a coat I had borrowed because I couldn't afford my own, I had no idea that I was walking straight into the after. I was 26 years old. I worked double shifts at a small accounting firm back home. I paid my own rent, cooked my own meals, and sent money to my mother every single month, because that's what we did. We survived, together, just the two of us. My name is Lila, and for 26 years, I believed my father was a man named Rami, a quiet, gentle man who died in a road accident when I was only 3 years old. My mother kept one photo of him on the shelf above the television, a grainy, faded picture, a soft smile, kind eyes. That photo was my entire story of who I came from, until a lawyer called. His name was Mr. Hoffman, Swiss accent, very formal, very calm. He said he was representing the estate of a man named Edouard Brennan, a name I had never heard in my entire life. He said there were documents. He said there were assets. He said my presence was required in Geneva. I almost laughed. "I think you have the wrong person," I told him. "Miss Lila," he said carefully, "we have a DNA match. We've been looking for you for almost 2 years." I sat down, right there in the middle of my kitchen floor, because my legs simply stopped working. My mother was sitting across from me at the table. She was holding her cup of tea, and when I looked at her, really looked at her, something passed across her face, something I had never seen before. It wasn't surprise. It was relief, like a secret she had been holding for 26 years had finally found its way out of her hands. "Mama," I whispered, "what is he talking about?" She set her cup down very slowly. She folded her hands in her lap, and she said 5 words that unraveled every single truth I had ever known about myself. "I was going to tell you." I didn't speak to her for 3 days. I couldn't. Every time I opened my mouth, the words just dissolved into something too big, too tangled, too painful to untie. I walked around our small apartment like a ghost, touching things, looking at things, wondering what else in this life wasn't what it appeared to be. That photo of Rami on the shelf, his kind eyes, his soft smile, was any of it even real? My mother finally sat me down the night before my flight. She looked older than I had ever seen her look, smaller, like the truth had weight and it was pressing down on her shoulders. She told me that Rami was real. He was her first love. They were engaged, but before the wedding, she met Edouard, a European businessman who was passing through our city on a contract. It was brief, it was reckless, and when she realized she was pregnant, she was terrified. Edouard had already gone back to Europe. She had tried to contact him once. He never responded. So she married Rami, and Rami, who loved her completely, agreed to raise me as his own. 2 years later, he died in that accident, and my mother was left alone, with me, with a lie, and with a silence she decided was easier than the truth. "I protected you," she said, tears running quietly down her face. "I didn't want you to spend your whole life chasing a man who didn't want to be found." I looked at her for a long time. "But, Mama," I said softly, "what if he did want to be found? What if I wanted to know?" She had no answer for that, and the next morning I got on a plane to Geneva. The law office was everything I was not. Marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, a view of Lake Geneva that looked like something painted rather than real. Mr. Hoffman greeted me at the door, tall, precise, with the kind of composure that comes from spending a lifetime delivering difficult news to difficult people. He led me to a conference room. He offered me water. He opened a folder. And then he told me about Edouard Brennan. Edouard was 71 years old. He was French-Lebanese, which explained the name, the connection. He had built a real estate empire across Europe and the Middle East over 40 years. He had a penthouse in Geneva, a villa in the south of France, properties in Dubai, Beirut, and London. He also had a wife and 2 sons. Had, past tense. Edouard Brennan had died 6 weeks ago, heart failure, quietly in his sleep in his Geneva penthouse. And in his will, a will that had shocked his entire family, he had left 40% of his estate to a daughter no one knew existed. To me. Mr. Hoffman slid a photograph across the table, an older man, silver hair, dark eyes, a jaw that I recognized, not from memory, but from mirrors, from my own reflection. My hands were shaking so badly I had to press them flat against the table. He knew about me? I asked. He found out approximately 8 years ago, Mr. Hoffman said carefully. He hired investigators. It took them some time, but they located your mother. She confirmed the relationship but asked to be left alone. She said you were doing well. She said... He paused. She said you didn't need to know. The room tilted. My mother had known. For 8 years, she had known that my biological father had found us, had reached out, and she had sent him away. She had made a decision for me, again, without asking me, without telling me, without giving me the choice. Did he try to contact me directly? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He wanted to. He wrote you a letter. Several, in fact. Your mother asked him not to send them. She said it would confuse you, disrupt your life. He opened the folder again and slid a stack of envelopes across the table. 7 letters, all addressed to me, all unopened. My name, in a handwriting I had never seen before, in ink that had been sitting in a Geneva law office for years, waiting for me to be ready for a truth my mother had decided I wasn't. I pressed my fingers against the top envelope. I thought about the photo on the shelf, Rami's kind eyes, my mother's cup of tea. I thought about 26 years of half a story. And then, for the first time since all of this began, I didn't feel sadness. I felt something sharper, something quieter, something that sat in my chest like a stone. The 2 sons, my half-brothers, were already waiting. Their names were Sebastian and Mark, both older than me, both polished, entitled, and absolutely furious. Sebastian barely looked at me when we were introduced. Mark looked at me the way people look at something they intend to remove. You understand, Sebastian said in smooth, practiced English, that this will is going to be contested. Of course it will. Our father was not well in his final years. He was influenced. He was manipulated. By who? I asked. By me? I didn't even know his name 3 weeks ago. That silenced him, but only for a moment. Outside in the hallway after the meeting, Mark pulled me aside. He was quieter than his brother, more careful. He leaned close and said, very softly, "Whatever number you're thinking, we'll double it. Walk away now, and you walk away comfortable. Fight us, and you'll spend the next 10 years in courtrooms." I looked at him for a long moment. I wrote him 7 letters. Did you know that? 7 letters he never got to send. I haven't even read them yet. Mark's expression didn't change, but something behind his eyes shifted. I walked away. I read the letters that night, alone in my hotel room, with the lights of Geneva reflecting off the lake outside my window. The first one was from 8 years ago. Lila, he wrote, and just seeing my name in his handwriting made something crack open inside me. I don't know if this will ever reach you. I don't know if you'll want it to, but I need you to know that finding out about you was not a shock. It was a reckoning. It was the moment I understood that I had spent 40 years building a life and somehow managed to leave the most important thing out of it. I read all 7 letters. They spanned 8 years, his health declining, his regret deepening, his hope quiet, careful, never demanding. that someday I might want to know him, that someday we might sit across from each other even once and just talk. He never asked for forgiveness. He only asked for a chance my mother had quietly, carefully, lovingly taken away. I called her from the hotel room. It was late. She answered on the second ring, which told me she had been waiting. "He wrote me 7 letters, Mama," I said. Silence. "He reached out 8 years ago. He wanted to meet me, and you said no, for me, without me." "Lila, I'm not calling to fight," I said, and I meant it. Because somewhere between the first letter and the 7th, the sharpness in my chest had softened into something more complicated, something that understood grief and fear without excusing them. "I know why you did it. I know you thought you were protecting me, but I needed to hear his voice at least once, Mama. I needed to sit across from him and ask him why he left, and now I never can." She was crying. I could hear it, that soft, swallowed sound she always tried to hide. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't think." "I know," I said. "I know you didn't." Sebastian and Mark contested the will. Of course they did. It took 14 months, 3 countries, more lawyers than I had ever imagined could fit into a single case. They tried everything, questioned his mental state, questioned the DNA results, questioned whether the will had been improperly filed. But Edouard Brennan had been meticulous. Mr. Hoffman had made sure of that. Every document was airtight. Every test was certified. Every letter I had received was entered into evidence, 7 handwritten proofs of a father who had tried in the only ways left to him to reach his daughter. The court ruled in my favor, not for the money, though the settlement changed my life and my mother's life in ways I am still learning to accept. But the ruling mattered because it said, officially, legally, permanently, I existed. I was his, and he had chosen me. Sebastian and Mark received their inheritance. I received mine. We have never spoken since. I went back to Geneva once more, 6 months after everything settled. I asked Mr. Hoffman if I could see the penthouse. He arranged it quietly. I walked through those rooms alone, the art on the walls, the books on the shelves, the view of the lake that must have been the last thing he saw every morning. I stood in the middle of his study for a long time. On his desk, framed in simple silver, was a photograph. It was me, taken from a distance, a street somewhere back home. I was maybe 22, 23, walking, laughing at something, completely unaware of the camera. He had kept it on his desk all those years. I sat down in his chair. I held the photograph, and I let myself cry, not for what was lost, but for what almost was, for the version of this story where he had been braver sooner, where my mother had trusted me with the truth, where 2 strangers might have had a few years to become something. But that wasn't the story I got. The story I got was this one. I think about identity now in ways I never used to, about how much of ourselves is decided for us by the silences of the people who love us, by the fears they carry, by the choices they make in our names, believing they know best. My mother was not a villain. She was a frightened woman who made a human decision and then spent 26 years too afraid to undo it. Edouard was not a hero. He was a man who made mistakes early and spent his final years trying, quietly, imperfectly, to correct them. And I was a girl who grew up with half a story and a faded photograph and a shelf full of unanswered questions I didn't even know to ask. But I am not half a story anymore. I know my name. I know my face. I know where both of them came from. And I have learned, maybe the hardest way possible, that the truth doesn't always arrive on time. Sometimes it arrives late. Sometimes it arrives in an envelope, in a language you have to learn to read with your whole heart. But it always arrives. And when it does, even when it's too late, even when it hurts, Even when it changes everything you thought you were, it is still worth knowing, because a half-truth, no matter how lovingly given, is still a half-life, and every single one of us deserves the whole thing.